Hey folks, Steve Smith here. Hey folks, Ryan Johnson here. Hey folks, Duke Dukem here. What's wrong? Why can't I get my name right? Oh. There. I think this will do it. Hey folks, Dave McRae here. That's what was missing, the fucking finger. How you guys doing? Today we're going to talk about Indiana Jones 5, but not just Indiana Jones 5. We're also going to talk about Indiana Jones as a whole. And the reason why I wanted to do this video, I don't talk about Indiana Jones a lot on this channel. I've only uploaded, I think, one video where I talked about my favorite Indiana Jones movie, which was like 8 or 9 months ago. And I uploaded it at a time when I just started paying more attention to my channel. Believe it or not, I've had this channel since 2006, okay? Yeah. 12 years. But I primarily only used it to upload, my fan films, some original films, some minor things, here and there. And I only started to sort of talk to you guys and pay attention to it really kind of last spring, beginning of summer. And I barely had 1,000 subscribers then. And I'm closing in on 5,000 now, which is great. So, I uploaded that video around that time, and I think if you were to go back and look, it only has like 300 or 400 views, so it's nothing crazy. So a lot of the stuff that I talked about in that video, I think bears repeating here because we're talking about Indiana Jones as a whole and Indiana Jones 5. So let's get started. Okay, so the reason why I'm doing this video is because a couple of days ago, I read that Steven Spielberg was on stage at the TV Empire Awards, I think it was. He was accepting some sort of lifetime achievement thing or whatever it was. And he basically said, yes, we have a production start date now, a principal photography start date for the new Indiana Jones movie, which has had a release date for quite some time, which is July 2020. They're going to go to camera in April of 2019. So just over a year away. And which makes sense because when you're moving into production on something like an Indiana Jones movie, okay, that is going to have a big crew, a big cast, a big post-production, schedule. Yeah, you're just a few months shy of being only a year out from it hitting theaters. That kind of makes sense. Even that's pushing it a kind of close, in my opinion, but it makes sense. So are they in fact going to start in and around that time? Yes. The only way that I don't think they would start at that time in April of 2019 would be if they push the release date to a fall kind of thing, which I don't think they're going to do because Indiana Jones primarily is a summer movie. It always has been. Even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was a summer film. So that makes sense to me. But that's the only way that you would hear them changing the principal photography sort of start date. So kind of cool. I mean, it's becoming more and more a reality. And yes, it is going to be directed by Steven Spielberg, and it will star Harrison Ford. Now, before I get into what I want to see with an Indiana Jones 5 and where I think the series should go moving forward, I want to talk about the series as a whole, okay? Now, what I mentioned in that video that I uploaded months ago, I am going to repeat here because it bears repeating now that I have more eyes on the video, hopefully. My favorite Indiana Jones movie out of the original 3, okay, because that's all we had to go on up until 2008, is actually, funny enough, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It's always been my favorite. And the reason why it's always been my favorite is because it's the most different out of the original 3, okay? Raiders of the Lost Ark and Last Crusade, even though they're similar, they do have some parallels, right? They're both, dealing with Nazis. They both deal with biblical artifacts. They both primarily take place in the desert. There are a lot of parallels between the two, even though they are very different at the same time. But Temple of Doom is like the black sheep of the family, right? It's like the most different. And I've always been of the mindset that if Indiana Jones was really a globe-trotting archaeologist, as he claims to be, and he really is going after all sorts of different kinds of, artifacts for it belongs in a museum, if you know what I mean, then yeah, what is the likelihood that he would get himself involved in all kinds of different kinds of situations and scenarios with all different kinds of women and people and antagonists and, evil bad guys and crazy, places around the world? It's very high. He's not going to be going after the Nazis all the time, right? Even though I understand that, it took place in the 30s, and at that time, that was the Nazis were a big thing, right? They were rising to power under Hitler. And, so I get the theme of those two films, and it makes sense, and it's totally fine. But at the same time, if he's going after all different kinds of, things, I want to see him going up against a different kind of bad guy in a different place around the world, in a different sort of situation with different people and scenarios, right? But the one constant that doesn't change is Indiana Jones, his wit, his humor, his style, his charisma, his, heroic action presence, right? That never changes because he's Indiana Jones, but he always gets himself into different kinds of situations and scenarios. So that's why, for me, I like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom the best. I don't think it's the best movie. I think that belongs to Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think when you look at the original intent of the Indiana Jones character, when you look at what he was supposed to be, the reason why George Lucas came up with this idea, to base this character on the 1930s, swashbuckling B-movie serials of the time. Yes, Raiders of the Lost Ark is the poster child of a modern day, not so modern anymore, of course it's 1981, right? But at that time, it was the modern version of something that happened 50 years earlier. And it makes perfect sense. It is the epitome of that character. And Raiders of the Lost Ark is a fantastic movie from beginning to end. It's certainly one of my favorites, 100%. It is a great movie. It is the best Indiana Jones film. But my favorite is Temple of Doom for the reasons that I just said. It's crazy. It's like one big action sequence after another. It's off the chart. Like the opening is just, it just doesn't stop for like the first, 10, 15 minutes of the movie. So, and the castle and, the dark magic and the voodoo and the eating of the bugs and it's crazy. It's off the chain crazy. And, I understand that, of course, at the time, it was the movie, even though Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was rated PG, it was the movie, believe it or not, that caused the Motion Picture Association of America to usher in a new era of rating, which was PG-13, because Temple of Doom was very intense, right? And it was kind of like, well, it's not really R-rated, but it's not PG. We need something in between here. Like we need some, and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was the cause for that. So that's kind of cool. Some interesting trivia for you there if you did not know that. And of course, it was also a darker film because Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were both going through some dark moments in their life. I believe they were both going through divorces at the time, and things were kind of shitty in their personal lives. So they decided to sort of, translate that darkness and that sort of sorrow that they were going through, kind of into the dark themes of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It was sort of a way, in some ways, to get it off their chest, to sort of, release that darkness into a dark movie. But I love it. I love it. It's fantastic. And that's why I love Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom the best, is because it's the most different. Because again, if he was this guy going all over the world, yeah, I mean, what is the likelihood that this crazy swashbuckling archaeologist that, pulls no punches would get himself involved in a crazy fucking scenario like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom? Yeah, it's pretty fucking high. It's pretty high. Another thing that I actually quite like about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and it's nothing major, but it is interesting, is at the very beginning of the movie, it's the only Indiana Jones movie that actually uses the iconic Indiana Jones logo for the title of the film. You don't get that in Raiders, and you don't get it in Last Crusade, and you don't get it in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Now, obviously, Raiders of the Lost Ark was just called Raiders of the Lost Ark, and there was no Indiana Jones in front of it. But even on the Raiders of the Lost Ark poster, the title Raiders of the Lost Ark is in the same font and style as the Indiana Jones part is on the subsequent posters. But even at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's not not in that font. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is the only Indiana Jones movie that actually utilizes the iconic logo. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It doesn't mean, the movie's going to be great, but it's just another sort of little kind of nice touch that makes it feel very Indiana Jonesy. Now, of course, there could be many reasons why that is. When you look at the opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's very eerie, very quiet, very suspenseful, right? When you look at the opening of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, it's very sort of ominous and quiet. There's that kind of eeriness to it as well, right? When you look at the opening of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it's a little more upbeat because we have those young teenagers in the car listening to music. The music is upbeat, but especially with Raiders and Last Crusade, it may not have fit because the Indiana Jones logo is very sort of loud and in your face and exciting. And to open Raiders of the Lost Ark with that kind of loud, colorful sort of logo doesn't actually fit the mood and the tone that they're going for at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And you could say the same thing with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade as well. It doesn't really fit the overall tone that they're setting at the beginning of that movie. So could you have gotten away with using it at the beginning of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull because it's a little more louder of an opening because of the cars and the music and things like that? Yeah, you probably could have, but at the same time, I can certainly see why maybe they didn't. If I had to rank them in terms of my favorites, it would be Temple, Raiders, and Last Crusade. If I had to rank them in terms of the best, it would be Raiders, Temple, Last Crusade. Now, I know that may surprise some of you because Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is affectionately thought of by and large by a lot of people as the best or the one they love the most. But I think that's primarily because it came out in 1989, and I think a lot of Indiana Jones fans were of an age where that was the first Indiana Jones movie they either saw, it was the first Indiana Jones movie they saw in the theater, maybe it was the first, their introduction to the series and the character. So I'm not saying for you that is the reason, and I'm not saying that is the reason overall. I'm saying by and large that could play a role into it. Because there's things about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade that I really like, and there's a lot of things that I didn't like. I thought the tone at times was a little off. Indiana Jones always has that humor. Raiders had that humor. Temple of Doom certainly has that humor. And one could argue and say that it was spoofy sometimes, like they weren't taking themselves too seriously. But the darkness of Temple always sort of evened that out. At any moment where it looked like Temple was going a little campy or a little sort of breaking the fourth wall, not completely, of course, it's not like they're turning to the camera and talking to you, but kind of getting a little spoofy, like they're making fun of themselves, it always immediately was countered with the darkness and the intensity of the theme of that movie. So it never felt like they were doing it to me. Last Crusade has that, there's moments in Last Crusade that feel, it's not quite Halloween 5 where the cops come out of the house and you hear that undertone of that cartoon fucking music, right? The boom, beep, beep, boom, beep, boom, woo, woo, woo. Like you certainly don't hear that in the Last Crusade, but there's a few moments where it feels kind of hokey and kind of a little too light. I wanted it to be a little more intense, a little more, like I understand that you want to have the relationship between Sean Connery and Harrison Ford, which they had great chemistry. They absolutely did. And that was the heart of the movie, 100%. But I just felt at times it was a little spoofy and it wasn't balanced enough with what was going on over here to make it feel organic. It feels sort of like they were making fun of themselves and they didn't balance it out. I don't know if you guys agree with me or know what I'm talking about, but I always felt that Last Crusade had that flavor and it didn't quite sit with me right. I like the movie, don't get me wrong. I could watch it over and over and I have no issues with it. But there's just certain moments, like the time when Harrison Ford, when Indiana Jones shows up to the castle, right, to get his dad with the woman, and he's dressed in the coat and the hat, and he's like, talking in some sort of accent, and he's sneezing, and it just feels kind of, But what gets me through it is I look, or not gets me through it. I mean, that sounds like I don't like the movie. What helps me to accept this part of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, or these parts of the movie, is to remind myself that yes, he is a swashbuckling archaeologist who gets himself into crazy different kinds of situations and scenarios, and who's to say this isn't a situation that he could find himself in? So, and maybe that's sort of what Spielberg and Lucas thought as well. There's just, for me, Last Crusade just has that element to it that I was like, feels a little lighter than the other two, a lot lighter than the other two, which I just wasn't a big fan of. And moving on to Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the reason why that movie didn't work by and large is because at no point in time, it had nothing to do with Harrison Ford's age, okay? Even at the time, 10 years ago, people were like, Indiana Jones and the wheelchair, Indiana Jones and the attack of the old age home. I mean, even at that, I can't wait to see what they're going to fucking say now. Because, at that time they were, doing it and he was like 65. Now he's going to be like, 76 and he's going to be doing it. So it's going to be crazy to see what people come up with now, what kind of crazy fun posters people come up with, because, the internet and social media has changed so much in the last 10 years that I can't wait to see the fan posters of like Indiana Jones, in a wheelchair or something. Anyway, that aside, it had nothing to do with his age, and everything to do with, number one, at no given point in time did I feel that Indiana Jones was in any real danger. And say what you want about the nuking of the fridge and, all that kind of shit. That, for me, didn't bother me. Yes, the CG gopher sort of bothered me, but that didn't bother me. It didn't bother me. Believe it or not, it didn't bother me. And I think it was because it was the only part of the movie where I felt any sort of tension, any sort of suspense, like, holy fuck, how is Indiana Jones going to get out of this one? We know he always gets out of the shit that he gets into, but how the fuck is he going to get out of this one? And maybe it was a little cheesy and a little campy and a little unrealistic, but in the beginning of that movie, I felt the suspense. I felt the tension. I could see the sweat on his face, right? I could see, see that he had his shirt open. He had, the sweat, glistening on his chest, and he was running around trying to figure shit out. It felt like, holy fuck, how is he going to get out of this? The rest of the movie, Indiana Jones was he was never in any real danger. I never felt at any point in time, how the fuck is he going to get out of this, right? He also had too many people with him. The focus was no longer on just Indiana Jones and, say, a girl, right? It was on Indiana Jones, the girl, Ray Winstone's character, Shia LaBeouf's character, John Hurt's character. They were all together. It was like this, ensemble of them going to find this thing. That's like, the focus was not on Indiana Jones. And there was no, because you had to focus on so many different characters, you couldn't focus solely on Indiana Jones and the girl and give Indiana Jones more to do. I wanted to see the sweat on his face. I wanted to see him take off his jacket, right? And get a tear in his shirt. Harrison Ford was in good shape. He absolutely could have done the physical acting part. Harrison Ford has always said, I don't do stunts, but I will do physical acting, right? And physical acting is the tussle, the wrestling, the punching, falling on the ground, all that kind of shit, right? He certainly can work up a sweat having some sort of tussle with a big fucking guy. He can work up a sweat, jumping from here to here. He can work up a sweat, climbing up something where he's getting the sweat on him and he's trying to hold on. He can do all that. What Harrison Ford is not going to do is, jumping from a tall building, right? Leaping from a plane, falling 30 feet. I mean, that's not going to be Harrison Ford, but you put in a stunt double, right? That's what you do. Are there things that he probably couldn't do in 2008 that he could do in 1981 or 84 or 89? Yes, sure. But then you put in the stunt guy, right? But Harrison Ford could do a lot. Okay, in 2008, he did a lot in 2015 in The Force Awakens, and he certainly will be able to do a fair bit in this new Indiana Jones movie. But the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, there was at no point where I felt like Harrison Ford, that Indiana Jones was in real danger. I mean, real danger. Okay, it felt too clean, too polished, too pristine, and it was nice to look at. but it wasn't Indiana Jones. I didn't feel that sweat and that grit and that grime and that intensity and that out of breathness that you see in Raiders, that you see in Temple, that you see in The Last Crusade, right? You don't see that in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And I know a lot of people want to point to the UFOs and the aliens. I'm telling you, okay? That, for me, was the least of its problems. It's the 1950s. UFO and aliens was a big thing at that time. It was a big thing in serials and B-movies and, all that kind of shit as well. It makes sense. That's the least of its problems. You have an Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull movie that is that is gritty and grimy, and Harrison Ford's character is in danger and out of breath and all that kind of shit, and you get rid of the son, and you get rid of John Hurt's character, and you get rid of Ray Winstone's character, and you just have it as Marion and Indiana Jones again. Maybe one other person, maybe. Hang on a second here. Now it's starting to shape up. Okay, what do we got here? You give Cate Blanchett's character a little more to do to face off against Indiana Jones, very much like Belloc in Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? Okay, you start to shape Kingdom of the Crystal Skull just a bit differently, and the UFO alien thing starts to kind of become less and less of a problem. I agree that the ending of the movie with the UFO coming out of the ground and flying off, yeah, that was a little very CG'd, very not Indiana Jones. Yes, there was way too much CG in that Indiana Jones movie. And there's always going to be CG in these big, bombastic, heavy-duty movies going forward. There will be. There's a shitload of CG in The Force Awakens, even though there's a lot of practical effects. There's a shitload of CG in The Last Jedi, even though there's a shitload of practical effects. But it's blended in so well that you don't notice it. With Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it was very apparent that the waterfalls were all CG. It was very apparent that the big contraption at the end of the movie was CG. Did they build a lot of sets? They did, but it wasn't mixed and blended well enough for me to sort of buy into it and not worry about it. But maybe had Harrison Ford actually taken off his fucking jacket and broken a sweat, and, I felt like he was in some sort of real ass danger at some point where there were booby traps and things going on and shit happening and all that kind of fucking shit. I mean, real fucking tension like you got in like the Temple of Doom in that room with the spikes coming down, like that kind of shit. If we got that kind of shit, old school Indiana Jones in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the alien aspect becomes, for me, less and less of an issue because you're building an Indiana Jones movie around that subject, which I think could be pretty cool. I think it could have worked. I really do believe it. I believe if you axe a lot of the characters, restructure, the narrative, basically what I'm saying is if you rewrite the fucking script, okay, but don't change the MacGuffin. Don't change, the alien aspect of it, but rewrite the script to be more of the Indiana Jones flavor, the gritty, grimy Indiana Jones that we love from Raiders or from Temple or even from Last Crusade at times. I think it could have. I think it could have worked. I think it could have worked. I strongly believe that. That was the first thing I thought of when I walked out of the theater back in 2008 was, well, it was great to see Indiana Jones on screen again, but I didn't feel like it was an Indiana Jones movie. Do you know what I mean? It was strange. It had moments and flashes, and there's some redeeming qualities in certain moments, but I wasn't feeling it, if you know what I mean. Anyways, that's how I feel by and large of the entire Indiana Jones, I want to say trilogy, but all 4 Indiana Jones movies. So now let's move on to Indiana Jones 5. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, they are planning to start shooting the movie in April of 2019. We don't know what the story is yet. It is being written by David Koepp. Now, some people are going to be like, oh my God, he's the guy that wrote Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Well, he is, but the script was also co-written by George Lucas and Jeff Nathanson. So we have to keep that in mind. Let's not forget that David Koepp also wrote the screenplay, mind you, it was adapted, but nonetheless to Jurassic Park. He also wrote the screenplay, I brought it up here, he also wrote the screenplay to films like On His Own, I'm talking about, where he's the sole writer, Bad Influence, Carlito's Way, The Trigger Effect, Snake Eyes, Panic Room, the original Spider-Man from 2002, Secret Window from 2004. So I mean, he's got some good movies there. Will he write a great movie for this fifth installment? I don't know. But I think now that George Lucas is removed from it, potentially, I could totally see George Lucas coming back. Not necessarily maybe in a writing position, but maybe in a creative consultant position or something to that effect. Not saying he's going to, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did, because his best friend, Steven Spielberg, is directing it. And I think I could see Steven saying, George, come on down to the set. George, come on down and hang out. George, what do you think of this? Because George Lucas was the one that created the character. We have him to thank for it. So we have to remember that. But what do they need to do? Oh God, I sound like a broken record. You got to go back to the fucking roots. You got to make this movie a gritty, grimy Indiana Jones movie, okay? I don't mean that Harrison Ford is going to be 76 years old when you guys start shooting. I don't mean that he has to be this, he's got to be doing crazy-ass things. No, obviously not. But you've got to have Indiana Jones in danger. There's got to be suspense. There's got to be tension. There's got to be real booby traps. There's got to be situations where I'm like, how the fuck is he going to get out of this? That's fucking intense. Holy shit. I didn't feel that in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It was too clean. It was too polished. It was too pristine. I want Indiana Jones with his shirt off. Maybe not 76-year-old Indiana Jones with his shirt off, but I want him with his jacket off, okay? His shirt torn, blood on his face, hanging from something. I want to see the sweat and I want to see the pores in his skin. I want to feel like he's sweating and he's really in some sort of high octane situation. That's what I want to see. Of course, I want it to be very reflective of the times. I don't necessarily want you to place it in the 1930s and then use de-aging technology on him. Put it in the 60s now, okay? There's a lot of interesting, crazy-ass things that you can still have him going after biblical artifacts. Look, if you guys love that aspect about the Indiana Jones character, go to town, all right? Do it. One of the earlier ideas for an Indiana Jones movie that I always thought would have been awesome because there's a lot of potential there, there's a lot of meat there, a lot of fat there, would have been the Lost City of Atlantis. I always thought, that would make a really cool Indiana Jones film. That would be cool. That would totally be cool. And you can do that in any decade. It doesn't matter if it's the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever it is. So that's an idea. But at its core, when you're looking at the Indiana Jones character, he is a globe-trotting archaeologist who gets himself into fucked up, crazy situations with crazy people. Okay? And I want to see Indiana Jones breaking a sweat, and I want the CGI that you're going to use to blend seamlessly in with the practical effects that I think you should use. Okay? Don't fucking just go all CG diarrhea, on us here. I want you to go back to the roots of what the Indiana Jones films are. He's a swashbuckling archaeologist who gets himself into different kinds of situations. If Harrison Ford can no longer be that character, then you must cast someone younger. Yes, I agree 100%. I don't want to see an elderly Indiana Jones doing things that are not necessarily believable to the character of that age. And if that's what you're going to do, then you have to cast someone younger. Now, I know a lot of people have been saying, cast Chris Pratt. Yeah, I want Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt would make a great Indiana Jones. Fuck Chris Pratt. I have nothing against Chris Pratt, but that only came to be because of his success in Guardians of the Galaxy and his sort of sly kind of, swashbuckling kind of, charismatic, arrogant kind of tone that he had, right? The humor and the charisma that he had in Guardians of the Galaxy and his sort of slyness in, Jurassic World. And people are like, oh, he'd make a great Indiana Jones because somebody happened to Photoshop his face on Harrison Ford's body in a promo shot for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Did that picture work? Look, yeah, okay. Could he be Indiana Jones? I guess. But I'm telling you right now, Chris Pratt, for me, is too jockey. He's too that high school jock. I don't believe him as an archaeologist. That doesn't mean he couldn't be, but I just don't see him as an archaeologist. I just don't buy it. For me, there's a lot to prove, okay? I don't want Chris Pratt to be Indiana Jones just because Chris Pratt is hot and in demand right now. Fuck that shit. That's not what I want, okay? I want somebody who's going to do justice to the character. That doesn't mean you go in and you emulate Harrison Ford. That doesn't mean you go in and you become Harrison Ford. Not at all. But you do justice to what the character is, what Harrison Ford laid the ground roots for. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. And he's not too old. He's on the older side. He's 49 now. He'll probably be 50 this year, I think. But he's young enough that you could do a trilogy with this guy and totally get away with it. And he's in phenomenal shape. I've said it before. I will say it again. I always thought a great and look, hey, Harrison Ford's my favorite actor. It's nearly like, it's crazy to think of anybody else playing Indiana Jones other than Harrison Ford, right? But when I thought of this guy, I was like, oh, I would be okay with that. Weird, but I would be okay with it. He totally could pull it off. I could see it. I could buy it. Hugh Jackman. I'm telling you right now, he's got the looks, he's got the charisma, he's got the humor, he's in shape. Put a fucking Indiana Jones hat on him and the jacket and the whip, and he gets himself, in all sorts of different kinds of scenarios with different kinds of women, and crazy ass villains and shit. Totally. When I look at Hugh Jackman and I think of him as Indiana Jones, yes, I totally could buy Hugh Jackman as Indiana Jones. Maybe you don't agree with me, and that's fine. That's fair. But I totally buy it. If they said tomorrow that Hugh Jackman was our new Indiana Jones and he signed on to do like a new trilogy or something like that, I'd be like, yes, I'd be thrilled. I'd be happy because I believe he has the acting chops, the charisma, the looks, and the understanding of what, he has the experience to go into a situation like taking on an iconic role like Indiana Jones and doing it justice, saying, okay, I'm not going to, talk like Harrison Ford. I'm not going to become Harrison Ford, but this is what the character is. This is who Indiana Jones is. That's who I'm going to become. I'm going to become Indiana Jones. Fuck yes. I would love to see an Indiana Jones movie with Hugh Jackman. Like, picture that. I think it'd be awesome. So, obviously I'm not saying that is what they're going to do, but I'm calling it right now. Disney, Lucasfilm, if you're watching, get that fucking guy signed because I think he could be your next Indiana Jones. He's young enough. He's older, but he's young enough and in great shape that he could do 3 movies. Totally. 100%. Knock him out 2 years. He'll be 55 by the time he's done. Fuck yes. And if he's really good, and if we really, take to him as being Indiana Jones, you could sneak another movie in there as well. Make it 4, 100%, no problem. But I think they're going to go younger because I think that's where they of course, this is fucking Disney, right? I think because they want to attract, the younger demographic. They're going to want somebody hot, who's hot, not just hot in looks, but, who's hot in terms of, their career is on fire. And Chris Pratt, obviously fits that. And there would be a lot to prove for me to buy him as Indiana Jones. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying I'm not crazy about it. If it were up to me, I would seriously pursue Hugh Jackman as the potential new Indiana Jones. Is this going to be the last Indiana Jones movie? Indiana Jones 5? No, I don't believe it will be the last Indiana Jones movie, but I think the probability of it being Harrison Ford's last Indiana Jones movie is huge. And yes, I believe this probably will be the last Harrison Ford Indiana Jones movie we ever see. How they structure that, how they pass the torch, whether they decide to pass the torch at all, or they just sort of wrap it up with Harrison Ford, and then in a few years down the road, they kind of begin begin the series again. I don't mean remake, Raiders of the Lost Ark or Temple or anything like that. I don't mean remake those movies, but begin again sort of in the 30s with a younger actor with different sort of adventures, I think is probably what they're going to do. But the other movies are still going to be canon. It's just we have another actor playing the role. So I think the adventures of Raiders and Temple and Last Crusade will be canon in the new sort of movies that they were doing. It's just a different actor playing that iconic character. So that's what I think they're going to do. But I think they want to give a proper sort of heroic send-off to the Indiana Jones character that they tried to do with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but they didn't. It's kind of like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is Rocky V, right? And they want to come back and deliver a Rocky Balboa. They want to give a proper send-off to the character, which I completely understand. So that's all I got to say on it so far. So comment below and let me know your thoughts. My name is Dave McRae. If you want to follow me on Facebook, you can at facebook.com/manythingsdavemcrae. McRae is MCRAE. Facebook.com/manythingsdavemcrae. You can follow me there in the meantime and in between time when I'm not posting here and doing videos. That's where I tend to post. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon. Comment below and let me know your thoughts. What are your favorite Indiana Jones movies and why? Put the ranking below because I do want to know. Again, if I don't comment back, it's nothing personal. I do get a lot of comments and I do try to read as many as I can. I'm a busy guy, but I always appreciate everybody chiming in and letting me know what you think. Totally awesome, guys. I appreciate all of you. So until next time, I will talk to you guys soon. Cheers.